Hi, my name is Melinda Smith from Noble Works, the leading provider of Enneagram workshops in Australia. This video is part of a series about this ancient tool for personality profiling and development called the Enneagram. We've partnered with Port Stephens Council in New South Wales, Australia, to share our learnings about the value of using the Enneagram as a tool for personal and organisational transformation in the workplace. The Council has made a significant commitment during the past decade to develop staff to be the best they can be by using the Enneagram. Self-awareness is a key leadership competency. Self-aware people transform themselves and their organisations. In this episode, we'll be talking about the Enneagram Type 8. I'm here with Greg Cable from Port Stephens Council, who is going to share with us how the knowledge of the Enneagram has improved and helped develop relationships and performance, personally and professionally. So Greg, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I can. I've been in local government for 35 years this year, the last 8 of which have been here at Port Stephens Council. And for the last 3 years, I've been the Group Manager of Facilities and Services here at Council, which is essentially, Council's made up of 3 groups, and it's essentially the delivery arm of Council. So all the external facing works, as well as some community service aspects with libraries and childcare. A really exciting place to work and a really good area to be involved in.
When you've arrived here at Port Stephens Council, you've been introduced to the Enneagram. In a broad picture, how have you been able to use that with the people you've been managing?
It's been a really handy tool. So prior to starting with Port Stephens Council, I'd seen other personality types, if you like, or other personality profiling tools. But certainly the Enneagram, I suppose when I first started to do the first couple of sessions with it, I learnt so much about the way that I used to react to things. And certainly being an 8, it was a gut-driven instinct. So for the first, I suppose, 26 or 27 years of my experience, it was all about how I reacted to things on the fly, and very much gut-driven. If I had a good feeling about someone, or if I had a good feeling about the job, that's generally the way I went. And I didn't spend too much time going back over and reviewing and reflecting on my decisions. It was there was stuff on the run, and I thought a lot about paralysis by analysis. I didn't like taking time to make decisions because time was money, and especially if you've got a background in construction and roads maintenance and whatever else, any time you take to make a decision, there's extra cost on the job. So it was really about reacting to that. Once I learnt more about the Enneagram and about the way an 8 reacts, I suppose it was up to me then to make a few subtle changes to the way I operated. So I still make a lot of decisions based on the way I feel, but I'm now conscious of the fact that I need to review those decisions in light of the fact that sometimes I can act too quickly and maybe act with a little bit too much energy at times as well.
Well, take us a little bit further into the world of a Type 8. How would you describe that, and what does that look like?
An 8 for me, and it's something that's become clear since I've done the training here at Port Stephens Council, is someone that likes really straightforward communication. So I like people to say what they mean. I don't like people that beat around the bush or try and sugarcoat things. Direct communication is the best way to communicate with me. And while I suppose I'm slow to forgive people who might make mistakes or who might get down the wrong path, I certainly can forgive and forget as long as they don't try and hide something from me. So if you're dealing with an 8, particularly an 8 that's in a management role, the best way to deal with them without a doubt is to put things up front. And if something's going wrong, tell them something's going wrong as early as you can. They can always adapt. And I know from a personal perspective, if I know up front somebody's made a mistake, that's fine. I can deal with that and we can move on. If they don't tell me straight up and we left 3 or 4 weeks down the track and I'm left covering tracks for somebody that should have told me in the first place, then it could be a bit different outcome. So.
What are some of the gifts and strengths of a Type 8 that you bring to your role and you can see that Type 8s bring to organisations?
Yeah, from my perspective, I think 8s bring a lot of energy to a role. They like getting in and getting work done, and that's suited to my position in a delivery arm of Council. So we do come in with high energy. We do like new projects, but we also go through and finish a project off so we don't leave things hanging. I suppose the downside to that is sometimes we can go through too much energy, and that does one of 2 things. Either that can upset the people around us, and sometimes we can be a little bit too straightforward, and we need to temper that, if you like. But the second thing is that at different times I've seen 8s within this organisation, and certainly people that I would probably type as an 8 now previously can burn themselves out. If they run on too high an energy for too long a time, they can actually try and help people around them and put so much into it that they end up burning themselves out along the way. So something you've got to be very conscious of, and something I'm conscious of, is the effect of my energy on other people and the effect of using that energy on myself.
Well, you've touched on my next question. What have you learned about yourself in particular from your knowledge of the Enneagram, and in particular in your leadership role?
Yeah, I would say a lot. Would be the short answer. As I said, previously it was just all gut instinct with me, with the leadership role. Now I've taken time I reflect at the end of each day, and I probably reflect at the end of each major decision that I make, or each major interaction I had with other people. So I go away and review that just to make sure. 8s tend to get in, once we get on a roll, it just seems to go from one thing to another. I suppose the one thing I have learned is just to take time, take a breath, and check on myself and check on the impact I'm having on other people. I'm very conscious. When I first came here, there were a number of 8s in our leadership group, and they were all big people, and big men, essentially, is what they were. I'm very conscious of the fact, the impact that could have when they walked into a room. If we were doing something with leadership in a room and all of a sudden 3 big 8s walk into the room, it's sort of, at times it could overwhelm other people in the room. Something that I wasn't conscious of before, but certainly after 1 or 2 of those meetings, I had people approach me afterwards and say that they felt intimidated in the meeting, and they weren't going to speak up and, I suppose, give their best to the meeting because they felt intimidated by the 8s sitting in the room. So that's something I'm very conscious of now, and quite often at the start of a leadership meeting I might temper that with just a message to everybody and a general talk, if you like, just to lower the energy a little bit, and make sure everybody's on board and comfortable with committing to the meeting and contributing something as we go.
Well, that's great observations about externally, the influence that type 8s can have. What about internally? What are your stress and anger points?
I don't like things being hidden from me. I suppose when you read about an 8, or when you first learn about an 8 with the Enneagram, it talks a lot about the fact that they don't like disloyalty, and I think that's a fairly accurate observation. As I said before, we can take, everybody fails, and that's a great thing. We need to accept that, we need to learn from it and move on. What I don't like is the fact that somebody fails either because they mean to fail or they're not given 100%. I suppose that's something we need to be conscious of. Also, as an 8, we need to be conscious of the fact that sometimes you have got to turn the other cheek, and you've got to accept that people will make mistakes and you need to forgive and forget. And certainly part of the training that we do here through the Enneagram is to recognise that and make sure that we don't hold a grudge for the next 100 years, because that's the natural feel. And we learn to move on. We learn to accept people for what they are and move on with what we do.
So if I'm working with a type 8,
Yep.
either as a manager or a leader, and or as a co-worker, what are some of the things that I can work on to have a really good relationship, build a relationship with a type 8?
So people at work for me that I most closely identify with, and I suppose who I rate as really good contributors to the organisation, don't procrastinate. I don't like people who procrastinate and sit around and take longer than they should, I suppose, to make decisions. And as part of that, as I said before, I've had to temper that because I now realise that you've got to review decisions and you've got to think about things a bit more deeply. But once I get past someone thinking deeply about something and moving into the procrastination stage, that can rub me very, very quickly. I find it interesting working with 7s at times. I've got a number of 7s working with me, and that's nearly the opposite from my perspective, especially when they're in leadership roles, and got some great contributors as 7s, but I needed to be conscious of the way that I felt about the way they operated, and I needed to be conscious of the way they thought about me in operations. So that's been a big learning curve with that. Once you get your expectations set and you've got a bit of knowledge about the way the other person works, even if it's only a basic knowledge about where they may fall back to under pressure, or where they're at when they're working really well, I think that helps the relationship no end. And I think that benefits the whole organisation, not just the relationship between you and them.
Well, I was going to ask you about that in wrapping up. Knowing about, working with and benefiting from the Enneagram as a tool, how valuable do you think it's been to Port Stephens Council as an organisation?
I think it's been very valuable. Probably been highlighted to me more in the last 18 months. So we've had people working with teams over the last 18 months that have used the Enneagram as a tool to pull apart the communications within a team. So previously where I've seen it applied, we might be talking about an individual recognising behavioural traits in themselves or with people they work with, but particularly in the last 18 months where I've seen it work in teams where someone will come in and explain to people why they feel a certain way about other team members or why they are likely to feel another way about certain team members. And there's been some real light bulb moments in the last 18 months, and I've seen team productivity go through the roof in 2 or 3 teams simply because their expectations about dealing with other individuals within the team changes. Really beneficial, and it's made a huge difference to those teams which have been in my area, and I'm really grateful that they've used that profiling tool to be able to explain different behaviours and lift the productivity within a team.
So are we talking about developing self-awareness there?
Absolutely, that's part of it. And I think within that self-awareness is also an awareness within people about how they interact with others and about what impact they can have on others. So the 2 parts to it for me are being able to look inward and I suppose temper your energy and temper some of your behaviours, look for the positive traits and try and cut back on the negative ones, but also recognise about how you influence others and how you might be able to get the best out of others and empower others within your team.
Greg, for a busy type 8, thank you for taking the time to share your story with us today.
No problem, thank you very much.
Join us for another episode where you can learn more about each of the 9 Enneagram personality types as people share their journey, observations and insights. Also, check out our podcast series, Understanding Your Enneagram, on iTunes or our website.